After God healed me of my greatest hurt in the area of money and provision, and after He gave me the download on the ultimate truth about money, God kept speaking to me audibly, but this time around, it's all based on the area of generosity as opposed to my identity as a steward or the ultimate truth about money, since I've already learned those. There are a few stories of generosity that I'd like to share with you, and the absolute amounts involved, it was exactly in the order of small, medium, and large. And these stories of generosities involved money, and then there's a new story that's really extra large in size, and it's not necessarily related to money. And I'll wrap up with that. But first, with the small size story. I believe this took place sometime in 2016, and it was at Community Church. One Sunday, the seat on my right was vacant, and fairly late into the service, there's a brother who came in and sat next to me. I've never seen him before, and what I noticed was he was bringing a saxophone case with him, and he looked a lot like Kenny G. And another thing that struck me about this brother was that when he brought out his Bible, I've never ever seen a Bible that was so underlined and had notes written all over the margin. So I made it a point to say hi to him afterwards. So after the service, he and I introduced myself and found out that he is indeed a professional saxophone player, and he had just lost his job as a musician on a cruise ship, and he's stranded in Hong Kong at the moment, and he's playing in the streets in Central to earn a living. And so I thought, well, our worship band doesn't have a saxophone player, so I thought, well, should he decide to worship at our church, we could definitely jazz up our music with a professional saxophone player. So I introduced him to the worship band, and after they started talking, then I heard a voice from God. God said 3 words to me: give him money. So I walked away, I stepped aside, and then I looked in my wallet and I checked how much money I had on me. And I had 2 $500 notes on me, Hong Kong dollars. And so essentially I had 3 options. 1 is ignore the voice of God. 2 is give 50% of the cash I had on me to a total stranger. Or the last option is to empty my wallets and give all the cash I had on me to this brother. I picked the last option. I walked back to this brother and the worship band, and I said to him, "Excuse me, sir, there's something I'd like to talk to you about. Can we step aside?" I sat down with him, and I gave him the money, and then I said to him, "Well, you must be new at this church. I've never seen you here before. What brought you to our church today?" And then he told me, "Today, this morning, God told me to come to this church because someone was going to give me money and help out my situation." And then I felt like there's a current of electricity going through me, and I was stunned that out of my obedience, that this minor and small miracle was able to materialize. So this is a small size story, and I tell this all the time because I feel everybody can do this. Now we're on to the medium sized story. Around the beginning of 2017, there's a Korean American pastor by the name of Kenneth Bae, whom you may or may not have heard of. He came to our church to share his testimony. He was previously jailed in North Korea for about 2.5 years. I heard his testimony, was deeply moved, and we became friends. A few months later, around May of 2017, he came back to Hong Kong, and a brother from our church set up a small group dinner with him. After we finished eating, Pastor Bay started to talk about plans to start a new NGO based in Seoul, and it's to serve two purposes. One is to generate 24/7 prayer for North Korea, and more importantly, to help out the ex-North Koreans who are now living in Seoul. And the saddest thing about this group of people is that most of them are female. And essentially what they're doing is they're jumping from one hell into another. They escape North Korea, and then because they cannot adjust to getting a job in South Korea, etc., a lot of these women end up working in the red light district in Seoul. So that's really, really sad. So it was very heartwarming to hear Pastor Bay wanting to minister to this group of people, help them, teach them how to do job interviews, teach them how to dress properly for job interviews, teach them how to write a proper CV, etc. So as he finished talking about this, I suddenly heard a voice. This time I heard a number. And now the dinner was in Hong Kong, so logically the number I should have heard should have been in Hong Kong dollars. But no, I heard a very specific US dollar number. And my first reaction was, no, Lord, please. This will make it into a really expensive dinner. The number represented another 18% of my base salary. And that year, there was absolutely no way there could be a bonus at my job. And even though God had already taught me how to overcome negative cash flow, another 18% on my base salary definitely would have added onto the deficit, given that my income kept dropping since 2007, and it dropped further from 2014. So just to give you an idea, my total compensation was higher when I was a 25-year-old in 1997 than my compensation as a managing director in 2017. So anyways, so after that first reaction, I decided I better ask Pastor Bay if he knew how much money he needed to raise. So I said, well, Kenneth, do you know how much you need to raise for this new NGO? And he said, I have absolutely no idea. So I was like, whew, well, maybe I could forget about this for a while. And I was so nervous about this, I didn't even tell my wife, who was sitting next to me at dinner. 2 months went by, and in July, I received an email from Kenneth Bay, and it had very detailed plans on this new NGO. And at the very bottom of the detailed plans, there was a US dollar number. It was exactly the same as the number I had heard at dinner 2 months ago. On the one hand, I was very excited that now I'm part of this across space-time communication channel with the Lord. Yet at the same time, I was very burdened that it must mean that I have to raise this money and get it done for Kenneth so that he can start his new NGO. So I immediately started a chat group with the other families in attendance. There were five families in total, and I was very pleased that another brother who's a medical doctor, and he said, well, you know, there are 5 families here. Why don't we divide up the sum five ways, and each family come up with 1/5 and help this NGO to get set up. And I was like, yeah, that'll be great. Giving 1/5 is definitely giving the 100%, representing 18% of my base salary. So I promised that I would be the first to send the money to to Kenneth. So I asked him, well, in the brochure, it only says that the payment method is by PayPal. Now, I have nothing against PayPal, but I do understand that PayPal charges, fairly significant commissions. Is there a more direct and efficient way of sending you the money? And Kenneth said, yeah, we have a bank account set up in Seoul. For our NGO, you can just send the money to that account. After he said that, then I thought about it a little bit more, and then this thought came to me. He was just released from jail in North Korea recently. They've got to be watching his bank accounts, like who's helping him and etc. So an element of new fear entered into my heart with this new element of personal risk involved. I thought about it, and then very quickly I remembered a passage in 1 Peter chapter 4 that basically says, well, if you're going to be persecuted for following Jesus, well, you should not be surprised. This is to be expected, and you should treat this as a badge of honor. And it's far better for you to be persecuted for serving Christ rather than wrongdoing of other sorts. So immediately then I calmed down and I felt peace in my heart, and then I made the transfer to their Seoul bank account directly. To make a long story short, it took another 2 months. Back and forth with a lot of WhatsApp messages and emails with the other brothers and sisters. I ended up giving the full amount that God told me at the dinner a couple months ago. And because the NGO's budget was increased, it took the faithfulness of this medical doctor brother and the faithfulness of another sister who was in attendance at the dinner. The three of us together, we came up with this amount to kickstart this new NGO. So out of this story, God taught me that, well, I'm his fund manager or his steward. So whatever amount he tells me and whoever he wants to direct the funds to, I should not nickel and dime with him. And the other thing that he taught me was, I am not the only game in town. In the end, it took another brother and another sister and their faithfulness to come up with their respective amounts in order for this NGO to start. So it's not about me. I'm not the only game in town. It's a team effort to get this done. And now on to the large size story. Again, it was probably around beginning of 2017 when our church started to think about the possibility of buying our own premises. Once I heard that, I was very excited. I wanted to contribute significantly. So I started to look at my cash balance, and I decided on a number that I thought was generous. Thinking about it a little bit more deeply, I realized that it's not going to work because our church is relatively small in terms of the number of family units. And doing the math, basically every family unit had to come up with the same amount that I thought was generous in order to have even the remote possibility of buying the premises. So I had to look at my other assets to see if there was anything else that I could pledge to my church. There was one stock that I bought during the tech bubble in the year 2000. It's US listed, and back then it was a $10 US stock. By the time that this took place in 2017, this company transformed from being a gaming chip company to the proxy of the future of artificial intelligence, and the stock price went from 10 to 100 over this long period of time. And I thought, well, if it really takes off and stays as a leader in artificial intelligence, then the stock could very easily go from 100 to 1,000. So this is the pledge I made to God. I said to the Lord, whenever and wherever I I sell this investment, if it's above $100, then 50% of the profits I will give towards the church premises. And this was probably around middle of 2017 when I made this pledge. A few months later, in October, my department at work unexpectedly got shut down, and I was out of a job. And after the first 24 hours of dismay and distress, I decided, instead of immediately going to find a new job and a new source of cash flow, I'm going to write the book that I had talked about and thought about. Because if I didn't do it then, I probably will never do it. And I thought that writing the book, getting it published, getting endorsements, that would be my own way of fulfilling Matthew chapter 6, verse 33, which is to seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, then all else will be given to me. So by the time that my gardening period finished in January 2018, it was the first time in 25 years that I could buy and sell stock without prior approval to my senior management, because now I'm a free agent. In February 2nd of 2018, it was the early days of Trumponomics. The US market was in good shape. Everything was rosy. Out of nowhere, on that Friday, the Dow Jones Index fell by 666 points that night. Besides this unholy number, I was a bit distressed. I was a bit anxious because the stock had gone from 100 to over 200 in less than a year. And I was thinking, well, is now the time to cash out and lock in those profits for the church premises, because I can sell at will anytime now. So I prayed all day Saturday, asking God for guidance, and I didn't hear any answers. I slept so poorly on Saturday night that I almost missed church on Sunday. I got to church on Sunday, and I would be lying to you if I told you I remember what the pastor was preaching, except this one line that he said that didn't seem to correlate with anything that he had to talk about in the rest of the sermon. The pastor said, when God speaks to us, it's usually in a very soft voice and in very simple words that we can definitely understand. Once he finished that sentence, I heard one word: sell. At that point, I've had a lot of experience in hearing God's voice, so I knew this was definitely God speaking to me in answer to my desperate plea on what I should do about my stock portfolio. The only thing is, it's a one-word answer, and I would have preferred a little bit more granular instructions as to when exactly to sell, how much to sell, or what stocks to sell. Because my 25 years of professional training taught me that if the market is in good shape and there's an unexpected dip, the next day you should not sell. If anything, you should be buying the dip. So it was against my professional instincts to sell the following day. So I took it as a well noted with thanks, Lord. I will definitely keep it in mind, but let me think about it a little bit more. An hour later, after church was over, I drove Sylvia and the kids to watch a children's show. I was glad that they didn't buy a ticket for me, so I could do my quiet time on the curb. My daily quiet time routine is as follows. It's one chapter of Old Testament, one chapter of New Testament, one chapter of Psalms, and the chapter of Proverbs for the day. There are 31 chapters in Proverbs, so there is one chapter of wisdom for us each day. So that day was Sunday, February 4th. So I was supposed to read Proverbs 4. Now, I cannot explain why this happened, but 2 weeks prior to to this event, out of nowhere, I just decided that, well, you've read the NIV for like 5 to 6 years doing this routine. So maybe it's about time that you read a different translation so that you can get more out of your quiet time. So I randomly picked the Message as the new translation that I read. So the Proverbs 4 in the Message I've never read before. Proverbs 4 verse 5 in the NIV, which I've read 50, 60 times before. It says, "Get wisdom, get understanding." In the Message, I could not believe my eyes on how Eugene Peterson translated that. The translation in the Message for Proverbs 4, Proverbs 4 verse 5 reads, "Sell everything and buy wisdom." And immediately I sensed this massive electric current running through my body. And for the first time, God's message to me was not only by audio. This time it's by the word also. So he's gone multimedia in trying to communicate this important message to me. So right there and then, I decided I have to obey. Doesn't matter what my professional instincts are from 25 years of training, I must obey, and tomorrow morning I will start to sell everything. So the next morning, I called up my banker and I said, "Hey Michael, we've worked together for about 10 years. Do you ever remember I sold any stock?" And he said, "No." And then I said, "Okay, well today we're going to do something very different." And he said, "Well, what might that be?" I said, "We're going to sell everything." And he's like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Absolutely." So in the morning, we sold everything in Asia Pacific. And then I said, let's regroup at 3 p.m. Then I sold everything in Europe. And then I asked for the US night dealer's phone number. And by 11 p.m., I sold all the US stocks listed in the US, including the stock that I had pledged for church premises. The exit price was $217, which meant there was per share, there was a profit of $117 US per share, and 50% of that profit I gave to church for premises. So by 11 p.m. I had sold everything. Surprisingly, I felt really relaxed because I guess I didn't own any stock anymore. I didn't have any more anxiety. So I slept very well that night. The next morning when I got up, I prayed a very unusual prayer. I said, "Lord, please help me to not feel so stupid when I switch on my phone and see that everything has rebounded after I sold everything. I'm just trying to be obedient to you, and so please help me feel better." So I got up and I switched on my phone, and I had never, ever woken up my wife Sylvia because of the stock market. But that morning, I could not help it. I said, Sylvia, you're not going to believe it. The Dow Jones Index, after I sold everything, dropped another 1,500 points. And massive electricity current going through my body. I was stunned and I was ecstatic at the same time. And I was having these silly thoughts that, maybe you're now become this like super steward, and God will even teach you how to time when to sell high, and maybe he's going to tell me when to buy low again in terms of re-entering the stock market. But instead, God told me for the longest time to just be still. So for the longest time, even though I did continue to invest and to generate income, but I did not go back into the listed equity markets. Now on to the extra large size event of generosity. Basically, the extra large goes beyond money. It's my whole life. After I finished writing the book and submitted it to a publisher, I was just waiting for it to be published, and I thought that after it gets published, then God would give me back my normal life with a job in finance or whatever. But then what God has made super clear to me is that he had given me a new vision and a new mission for the rest of my life, and that is, together with his help, to battle mammon, to unveil the deceitfulness of wealth, because a lot of Christians are not reaping any fruits in their lives because of the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of wealth. So God, through a series of supernatural events, taught me that what he has in store for me is not just to live paycheck by paycheck. He's going to take care of me, as he has already taught me, but what he has molded me for 47 years is to be able to use my journey and my story to serve his greater purpose, which is to steer more Christians to serving God. Because Jesus said you could either serve God or you could serve money. You cannot serve both masters. And a lot of people are confused, and they end up being duped, and they end up serving money. So I pray that my story and my journey has been a blessing to you, and that it will help you to further examine your position on stewardship and generosity. May God bless you richly.